Grade 9, Chapter 7, Packing. This chapter is written by Jerome K. Jerome. The author Jerome K. Jerome has written a novel. This is an excerpt from his novel Three Men in a Boat. Do you like going on trips? What kind of trips do you enjoy most? How do you feel about having to pack for a trip? It is really exciting, isn't it? We often get excited and pack the things that we might not need on the journey. So, here in this story, we read about how Jerome planned to pack the things himself for the trip and what happened when he denied his friends not to help him. The writer, Jerome, liked to pack luggage for trips and announced that he would do the packing. I rather pride myself on my packing. Packing is one of those many things that I feel I know more about than any other person living. So this is what Jerome feels that packing is something that he could do better than anybody else in this world. I impressed the fact upon George and Harris and told them that they had better leave the whole matter entirely to me. They fell into the suggestion with readiness that had something uncanny about it. Why do you think the narrator said so? He took pride on himself and he felt that he was better off than anybody else. He denied his friends Harris and Jerome to lend a helping hand. And when he said so, George and Harris did accept the fact and they started doing their own work. Although they felt something that was uncanny. Uncanny here refers to strange or weird, but they preferred to keep quiet. George spread himself over the easy chair and Harris cocked his legs on the table. So this is how his friends thought not to disturb Jerome when he was packing the things. Jerome thought that his ability to pack luggage was better than others, and this is why he asked his friends George and Harris to leave the task of packing to him. When the two friends agreed to do the same, Jerome least expected to bother them, started doing the stuffs himself. As he started arranging the things, he thought that it had been cumbersome. George sat comfortably on easy chair and watched what Jerome did. Harris also bent his knees as he sat on the sofa and kept his feet on the table. He seemed to have been quite relaxed. This was hardly what I intended, Jerome says. What I had meant, of course, was that I should boss the job and that Harris and George should potter about under my directions. I pushing them aside every now and then with, oh, you, here, let me do it. There you are, simple enough. Really teaching them, as you might say. So, this is what Jerome thought that he would do when Harris and George would start packing the things. But nothing of this sort would take place, and there is nothing that could irritate him. Irritate him more than seeing other people sitting about doing nothing when I am working. So Jerome says that he got annoyed and irritated when George and Harris accepted the fact that George or Harris should not help Jerome while he was packing. Potter about refers to do something unimportant. By saying that he would pack, the writer did not mean that his friends would sit and relax while he would do all the work. He had meant that he would boss upon them while they would do all the chores. He would nag them and curse them for not knowing the work well, and then he would chip in to sort out the mess that they would create. He was irritated to see them sitting while he did all the work. Now, as we read further, we learn what had happened and why Jerome recollected the incident from the past. What made him feel annoyed the most, and why he thought that he had changed. I lived with a man once who used to make me mad. He would loll on the sofa and watch me doing things by the hour together. He said it did him real good to look on at me messing about. Now I am not like that. Loll on the sofa refers to recline or lean in a relaxed manner. I lived with a man once who used to make me mad that way. The speaker says so because he recollects that once he lived with a man who would sit lazily on the sofa all the day through and would watch the writer do all the work. The man would say that he enjoyed watching him go around doing all the work. This would make the writer mad with anger. The writer adds that he could not sit idle and watch others work like slaves. On the other hand, he liked to check their work, walk around with his hands in his pockets, and direct them on how to do the work properly. He feels that as he was energetic, it was a part of his nature to behave in that manner. So, if you see, Jerome would like to boss over others. This is what he concludes when he recollects the incident from the past. However, I did not say anything but started the packing. So instead of commenting on George and Harris, he started doing the things himself. It seemed a longer job than I had thought it was going to be. But I got the bag finished at last and I sat on it and stabbed it. Aren't you going to put the boots in? Said Harris. And I looked around and found I had forgotten them. So the writer did not say anything and started packing. But after a short while, Harris commented on what he had forgotten. It was the boots that he was expected to pack. This was followed by an irritating laughter by George, which made Jerome wild with anger. So, this was the reaction of Jerome when he saw that George was laughing at him. I opened the bag and packed the boots in, and then, just as I was going to close it, a horrible idea occurred to me. Had I packed my toothbrush? I don't know how it is, but I never do know whether I had pegged my toothbrush. So, this is how Jerome opened the bag once, thrice, and many times, and then he thought that it was really tiring to pack, unpack, and repack. And as he used to forget to pack many things that they would need on the journey, he used to get irritated. And after packing the boots, he realized that he had forgotten his toothbrush. So there is a hilarious account of how Jerome could recollect what he did while packing the things for the journey. As we read further, we learn that Jerome checked on what George and Harris did when it was George and Harris' turn. Jerome commented on them that they were the worst packers. Let us read further and see why does he say so. When I had finished, George asked if the soup was in. I said I didn't care a hang whether the soap was in or whether it wasn't, and I slammed the bag shut and shut it, and found that I had pegged my spectacles in it and had to reopen it, and it got shut up finally at 10:05 p.m. And then there remained the hampers to do. Harris said that we should be wanting to start in less than 12 hours' time and thought that he and George had better do the rest. And this is why Jerome agreed and sat down and they had a go. Didn't care a hang means show no concern or interest. Only the edible items were yet to be packed, so George and Harris took the responsibility of packing the same. George and Harry started packing the hampers in a happy mood. They wanted to show Jerome that they could pack well. Jerome waited for them to create a mess because he considered Harris to be the worst packer in the world. And when they started packing the things, Jerome did not comment on them, but he waited, watching them create the mess in the room. Why did he do so? Because he considered Harris to be the worst packer in the world. Jerome looked at the piles of plates, cups, kettles, and bottles, the jars, pies, cakes, and tomatoes, which had to be packed into the hampers. He thought that as the boys would mess up, it would be an interesting thing to watch. So, this is what Jerome thought when George and Harris were packing the hampers. Then Harris packed the strawberry jam on top of the tomato and squashed it, and they had to pick out the tomato with a spoon. The scene became interesting as they broke a cup at the start, and Jerome says that they broke the cup to indicate that they could do that too and to make things interesting. When Harris packed the jar of strawberry jam on top of the tomatoes were squashed by the jar, and then they removed the damaged or the squashed tomatoes with the help of the spoon. And then it was George's turn, and he trod on the butter. I didn't say anything, but I came over and sat on the edge of the table and watched them. So this is how Jerome observed his friends create mess in the house. They also upset salt over everything. This is what was seen when they were about to wind up with the hampers. Jerome hadn't seen anything like this before. He had not seen anyone create so much mess with butter that was worth 1 and 2 pence. I will take my oath I put it down on the chair, said Jerome. When he saw George messing up with the butter, George commented that he had left the butter somewhere carefully, but Harris did not accept the fact that he had seen it anywhere because he sat on the chair where the butter was kept, and George took the oath of being truthful. Then they started round the room, again looking for it, and they met again in the center and stared at one another. So, this is how the things were when they started helping Jerome. Montmorency was in it all, of course. Okay, who is Montmorency? Montmorency was Jerome's pet dog. When Jerome thought that George and Harris were the worst packers in this world, he forgot to mention what did Montmorency did to worsen the things. Montmorency would disturb everyone all the time. Montmorency's ambition in life is to get in the way and be sworn at. If he can swim in anywhere, he particularly is not wanted and be a perfect nuisance. And this is how he often used to make people mad. Jerome's pet dog Montmorency participated in all this, and his aim was to interrupt everyone and then get scolded for it. Jerome adds that if Montmorency was able to twist into a place and create nuisance by angering people and getting things thrown at him in return, he felt that he had utilized the day in a good way. So, this he thought would be the reaction of Montmorency when people scolded him for doing something that was not expected to be done by him. To get somebody to stumble over him and curse him steadily for an hour is his highest aim and object. And when he has succeeded in accomplishing this, his conceit becomes quite unbearable. So, if you read the story, you learn what did Montmorency do to create mess while they were packing the things. He came and sat down on things just when they were wanted to be packed, and he labored under the fixed belief that whenever Harris or George reached out their hand for anything, it was his cool damp nose that they wanted. He put his leg into the jam and he worried the teaspoons and he pretended that the lemons were rats and got into the hamper and killed three of them before Harris could land him with the frying pan. So if you see the image, you can make out what Montmorency did when they were packing the things. Harris said that I encouraged him, and Harris blamed Jerome for encouraging Montmorency for doing all this mischief. The packing was done at 12:50, and Harris sat on the big hamper and said he hoped nothing would be found broken. So, if we read further, you'll come across many incidences where Jerome felt that Harris and George were really creating a mess of everything. We tossed for beds and Harris had to sleep with me, he said. So later on, they thought to relax for a while. As they settled in their beds, Harris asked Jerome if he preferred the inside or the outside of the bed. And Jerome said that he would play a prank on George. So when George asked them that he should wake them up at what time, Harris replied 7, while Jerome wanted to wake up at 6 as he had to write some letters. So this is how the story ends. And Jerome plays prank on George as they wake up early next morning. The narrator of the story, Jerome, was proud of his packing skills and he was supposed to go on a trip with his friends, George and Harris. And this is how he recollects the memories of his past and pens down an interesting story. If you want to know more what happens next, please read the novel Three Men in a Boat. It is an interesting story that you would like to read. Try to read and comprehend the story and answer the questions that are given in the textbook.